start with the prayer. Om Samasta Jana Kalyani Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanura Mardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Dravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Amadeva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Gurudeva Deva. So we are analyzing the subtle body, and the subtle body has, besides the antakarana instruments, it has also accumulated the vasanas. Vasanas have accumulated from the previous life, and in the previous life they were before the previous life. So those accumulated vasanas that are brought in, we call it a prarabdha, and the total account is sanchita karma. The total balance of which we only brought in this life to exhaust and prarabdha. Also, because I am taken a human life where I have at every moment I have to make a choice in spite of my vasanas, I still have to make a decision making. A free will is there. So free will and destiny, they play side by side all through the human life. So once I perform an action in the present by a choice that I exercise, by willful choice, so doing, not doing, or doing another way, all are my choices. So even if I refuse to do when doing is required, that also gives vasanas. So I have to do. That's why the Krishna says, Niyatam Kuru. Therefore, do your obligatory duties. What you can avoid is kamya karma, desire prompted activities you can avoid by willful decision making process. Or if they are powerful desires, at least offer it to the Lord. So bring Him also into the picture, and in the process the power of those actions become nullified. And that's how Krishna talks about karma yoga. Ajnartham karma nonyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha. So tadartham kuru karma. So for yajnartham karma kuru, it means do the actions for the sake of yajna. That means in a cooperative action, in a self-sacrificing way, putting forth for best of it for the benefit of the totality. And that's how Swami Gurudev Ji is explained what is exactly yajna means. Yajna means also Lord Vishnu. So for the sake of Vishnu, but Vishnu is what? In the Vishnu Sahasranama, it states Vishwam Vishnu. So first nama is Vishwam. He is the whole universe itself. That is Vishwam. And Vishnu is the one who pervades the whole universe. So it is Vyapakatvat Vishnu, the one who pervades the whole universe. That means He is there everywhere. So whenever I perform the action with the word, I am performing and offering to the Lord. But offering to the Lord means I should have that understanding that I am offering to the Lord. So when I have that understanding, automatically I do not have the adharmic actions or adharmic thoughts, because I am dealing with the Lord Vishnu. That understanding helps in my evolution. That becomes a karma yoga. So when I perform an action now, the vasanas that accumulate when I perform an action in a self-centered way, then I got called agami karma, the results of the action which can be exhausted or put into account. So I am accountable for my vasanas, whether it's this life or many lives I may have to take. That's how I am going life after life after life, accumulating more and more vasanas also. But how am I going to exhaust all that? And can I realize this with all the vasana pressure? He says it can be done, because when I take a decision now to go towards higher, to go towards the Vedantic study, or to try to understand who I am, then this becomes a more powerful. So jnanena sarva karman, all actions can be burned out. And Bhagavan Ramana gives a simple example. Like an old package is like a cotton ball or cotton hill, and a simple matchstick will do to burn out the whole thing. The matchstick here is jnanam. Jnanam is I am. What kind of jnanam I need? I need akartaham, bhoktaham, ahamevaham avyaya. I am never a doer, even in the past also, because I am Atma. That understanding has to come. Now, we are analyzing who is that understanding, where does it come and how does it come. Now we need to understand in this jiva, there are two aspects that are inseparable. What is the aspect? The total consciousness that is all pervading, infinite, and that which doesn't have any differentiation of any kind. There is no ajnanam, there is no jnanam also. It is nature of pure jnanam. That means its swarupam is jnanam. That is satyam, jnanam, anantam. That is, it is consciousness. Their jnanam is consciousness. Because any jnanam involves consciousness. Because when I say I know this, means I am conscious of this. I know chemistry means I am conscious of all the chemistry knowledge itself. That is what essentially pure swarupa jnanam or consciousness. But in that all-pervading infinite consciousness, there is no difference of, there is no conscious of, because of means something else other than it, and when it is infinite, there is nothing other than it. Therefore, in Brahman, there is no of any kind, and that is pure Satchidanandam. And that Brahman doesn't have to realize, because it's already Brahman. Now, who has to realize what? That's what we are addressing. It says we said antahkarana. So the antahkarana means the mind and intellect, but mind and intellect itself is inert. It cannot be conscious entity. It cannot realize. Inert things cannot realize anything. So mind and intellect, the subtle body cannot realize because it's a body. The pure consciousness need not realize because it's already pure consciousness is infinite. Then who is realization? The one who doesn't know that I am Brahman is the one who has to realize. And who is that? That's what we are talking about, who is Jiva. So the pure consciousness is all pervading, is getting reflected as though in the subtle body. And we said the subtle body, because this is a light of reflection of the consciousness, it acts as though it is conscious entity. Just as the moon is becoming a luminous body by reflection of the sunlight. Moon doesn't have any luminosity of its own. In the same way, mind, intellect do not have consciousness of their own, but by reflecting the consciousness or the light of consciousness, and they as though become a conscious, local conscious entity. So now this is called Upahita Chaitanyam, or conditioned consciousness or reflected consciousness. It's called Chidabhasa. So all these words are being used in the Vedantic study. So one, depending upon the context, so one has to be very clear in what reference and what really it means. So essentially reflected consciousness or conditioned consciousness. It's not the consciousness is conditioned, only the reflection is conditioned. Because when I am looking at the moon and full moon, on the full moon night, the moon is bright, and what I am seeing is only reflected sunlight, but reflected sunlight that is falling on the moon only. The other light which is beyond the moon, I am not seeing that sunlight, because I see there is no light there until I see another planet somewhere and I see that planet, because now I am seeing the sunlight reflected by other planet. So in between I am not able to see, not that sunlight is not there, because there is no reflecting medium. So this has to be known. So wherever there is a reflecting medium, there is a reflection occurs. Reflection occurs because there is original light is there. So all these three things have to be involved. One is the original consciousness, that is all-pervading consciousness that I am, or that is pure Satchidananda. And there is a reflecting medium. We are talking about the local minds. And there is a reflection process where that total consciousness is getting reflected and make the mind as though conscious entity. Now if you ask Brahman, why are you making this? He says, I have nothing to do with it, because I am only one without a second. You can't even ask, or you can't even, the words cannot reach there. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. Upanishad says you can't even describe it, because any description involves words, and even words cannot reach there, because it is completely infinite. Nothing can be said about. Even the infinite is only saying that it is not finite. No attributes can be given, because it is nirgunam, because it is infinite. Infinite cannot have any gunas. But at the same time, we are talking about a different level. When we are talking about the guna aspect is reflected, when can have guna depending upon the reflecting medium. All this has to be understood. So who realizes now it is not the mind, it is not the pure consciousness, there is a fictitious entity as though came into picture, which is called conditioned consciousness or reflected consciousness or upahita chaitanyam. So upahita chaitanyam means upadhi. Upa means upadhi, that means instrument or a body that is activated. See the beauty of this. The whole conscious has nothing to do with it, but its mere presence of it makes the matter so dynamic, so lively, and all creation that you see, the beauty is only its manifestation. That's why in the 10th chapter of Gita, Krishna talks about, look at my vibhuti, my glory. And he points out the glorified thing that Arjuna has heard of, and in the end he says, I cannot say my vibhuti is limitless, because anything where you see the beauty manifesting, no, that is my vibhuti, my glory only. All that is implied, because all reflected consciousness, and there is a reflecting medium for that. So in the case of the jiva, how do we account it? Because there is the reflecting medium, and that subtle body, and we already enter into how subtle body form from the subtle elements and so on. So there is a subtle body formation by the process of the creative process. And when there is a subtle body, which is, when did the creation start? When you cannot ask the question, because when is a concept of time, time itself is a product after the creation, therefore it is beginningless. Only from the point of analysis, only for teaching it says before creation. We use the word before, but creation itself is a beginningless. When the reflection occurs by how? It is, there are two examples are given in the scriptures. You can say it is a local reflection or it is a global reflection of the medium. Even though it is a mind and intellect are local, the reflection can be as though whole thing is getting reflected, and that is example is given where if I have a pot and the pot is full with the water and the water is stable, then through the water there is a reflection of the total space in that water itself. Even though water is limited, pot is limited, but I can see the reflection of the whole space, the stars and the moons and everything else I can see in the reflection. Even though they are so big and so far away, including the distance also, I can see in the reflection. So same way, the medium, the local mind, buddhi is small or limited, and in that limited I can see the whole, the Brahman can be reflected just like the Jalakasha. That means the reflection of the space in the pot water. This is the example in the Panchadashi by Vidyaranya in the 6th chapter. Those who are interested, if you go to the YouTube and ask for Panchadashi 6th chapter under Acharya Sadaji, you will find those talks also available there. So in that That is an example where total Brahman is getting reflected in the water, even though hot water space is really limited and occupying only small space, but the reflection of the total space can occur. Same way, the reflection of the total as though occurring in the mind. Therefore, when the mind is folded, as in the deep sleep state, which will come later when we analyze Karana Sharira or a causal body, then the whole universe is also folded as though, because when I go to deep sleep state, the whole space is also, because the reflecting medium is no more there, therefore there is no reflection. Whether the true one is not there, is there or not, we cannot even say. Either the objects are there in the deep sleep state, it becomes an indeterminate problem. Therefore, the reflection of the total as though can occur even though the mind or the body or the intellect is small, now or limited. So this on the second example is also given in the scriptures. It is just like the local, as though local light is getting reflected, or local consciousness as though reflected. Even the local consciousness and global consciousness, there is no difference. But for the purpose of example, when we look at the moon, for example, and the full moonlight, only the local sunlight is getting reflected, right? Because the other sunlight that is beyond the moon is not getting reflected, it's going straight. Whereas if you go further all the way to another planet and we are seeing another planet, there the sunlight that is local in that place is getting reflected. So even though sunlight is all pervading, in this example, we are only getting reflections at the local parts as though, even though light cannot be parted. So all this is implied. These examples tell us in how one looks at it, of the problem of a jiva and problem of Ishvara later that we discuss. So the reflection can occur, either the total reflecting or local light can be reflecting. Either way, it is the reflected consciousness. Reflected consciousness demands two things. One is there has to be original consciousness to get reflected. The original light has to be there for which reflection occurs. And also it says there has to be a reflecting medium to reflect. So we have the original consciousness, we have a reflecting medium, and in the process we have a reflected consciousness. Now, as long as the mind, intellect or the subtle body is there, reflection will occur, because the original consciousness is always there. It is nityam, eternal, infinite. So that is always there. So wherever this subtle body is there, reflection will occur. So that we said, this reflected consciousness. So therefore, we have two things. This antakaranam, the mind and intellect or subtle body, along with the reflecting consciousness, moves from place to place, and that is what is called jiva. So jiva involves a total consciousness getting reflected plus the reflecting medium, since the medium is required. So that is the total upahita chaitanyam. Upahita means that reflected consciousness along with the reflected medium is called upadi. Upadi means instrument. Along with that, consciousness is there, because the reflection makes that upadi or makes that mind active as though it is alive or it is conscious entity. And we said there is no beginningless, it is a beginningless, because we cannot say when it started. That's why Krishna said, as we said, Natvevaham Jatana. There was never a time I was not there, never a time you were not there, never a time all these things were not there, and in the future also, until they realize. So even though it is a beginningless, they can end. How will it end? Because the root cause for this is the beginningless ignorance. When the ignorance, the original cause itself is removed, then the product is also not there. So that has to be understood, and that we will go into the analysis of how this happens. And the until then, that means until one realizes this movement of this subtle body from one body to other body continuously will happen. And life here and life to 14 lokas, I go up into other lokas depending upon my vasanas, whether punya karma, I go up. So chine punya martilokam vishanti, when they exhausted of punya karma, I'll be pushed out according to the Gita statement. So depending upon my credit of merits and demerits, I'll be taking a life or taking and occupy a particular body to exhaust those particular vasanas until they get exhausted. In all other lokas, the vasanas only get exhausted. I do not accumulate new vasanas. Only in this karma bhumi, that's where I have to be born again, where I can get exhausted also or accumulate new vasanas also. But also I have a choice in the action, therefore I can also transcend. Therefore even the gods would like to be born as a human beings so that they can realize. So realization is important. Therefore the whole Viveka Chudamani started with the statement, this Jantuvanam Narajanma Durlabhaha. So it is indeed rare indeed, and having given birth to this human life where I have a choice in the action at every moment, if I cannot make use of it, then the whole life becomes a waste. That we will analyze now in terms of how this process, and we go into details of essentially what is Maya, Maya Shakti and its properties, because now we are talking about the creation or the presence of the reflecting medium also, and how did it come and what are the properties of Trigunatmakam aspect of it will be analyzed next. With this we'll stop here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.